amazing presentations, and I'm going to be saying 2 more minutes, 1 more minute.
And we're going to try to keep things on time, and we really look forward to all the speakers that we have lined up today. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. One is ask for a big cup of coffee. They actually hide them in the back. That's what I learned this morning, and I thought I'd share that piece of information with you. The next thing is nurses in the room, or if you're not in the room yet, if you could pass on to pick up your travel bursary checks at the registration desk, and Jen's at the back of the room there. Jen's the person, if you have any questions about anything, Jen, leave your hand. She knows everything about everything. So, and if you are a speaker today, if you can bring me your bio, I have the first 3 already, but if you can make sure that I have your bio, if not, I get to make up things. And trust me, that is just not a safe place to go. So just bring up the bios to me. The restrooms are just across the hall there. They're pretty easy to find. And then, of course, that little thing that sometimes rings in your pocket, the cell phone, if you can make sure that you have those shut off so that we don't see people scrambling with embarrassment trying to shut them off. So nothing really earth-shattering about the issues there and the details there, but now we do have something that's earth-shattering. So now we get to move on to the program and the fun stuff. And I think that Stu and the gang that actually laid out the program did an amazing job here. Our first talk, as you can see here, is Ivor Mendez, Remote Presence Technologies for Healthcare. But let me tell you a bit about Dr. Mendez. He is the Fred H. Wigmore Professor and Unified Head of the Department of Surgery at the University of Saskatchewan and the Saskatoon Health Region. He received his MD and PhD in anatomy from the University of Western Ontario, where he completed his post-grad secondary training in neurosurgery. He did his research fellowship. Then he thought, well, you know, there's my experience in Ontario. He decided to cross over the Atlantic and went to the University of London, Sweden, and then came back to Canada, thank goodness, and went to Halifax, where he was the head of the Brain Repair Center. So he kept on going. His research focus over the years has been in functional neurosurgery, brain repair, stem cells, robotic neurosurgery, and computerized systems in neurosurgical applications. He's recognized internationally, as you can probably tell by the bio so far today, has over 200 peer-reviewed journal articles that he's published. And in the past decade, he's worked to the use of remote presence robotics for medical care in the area of neurosurgery. In 2002, Dr. Mendez's team performed the first long-distance telemonitoring neurosurgery in the world. And in 2013, we reported the first experience in remote programming for neuromodulation devices. So essentially, he's not only doing this remote neurosurgery applications here in Canada, but he's leading the world in this area. And we're sort of on his coattails as a country, really being a leader in this area, which is just fascinating. And obviously, the remote applications for this are so applicable to the remote healthcare providers here in the room. But what we're going to try to do is also make sure that every presenter is also recognized for just their human work. And I want to have I'm going to try to have an interesting fact for each presenter today. Dr. Mendez is also a gifted photographer and sculptor. So interesting, he's published 3 books on photography of Bolivia, and his sculptures have actually been exhibited in Bolivia, Canada, and the United States. So I don't know when he sleeps. Maybe he should have some neuromonitoring himself, but I'm so excited to have the tech team help us figure out how we're going to connect here. But we are now going to go, believe it or not, to Saskatoon.
Thank you very much. Wonderful introduction. It is really a pleasure to be here. You know, I just was coming from a meeting in Singapore about the future of medicine. And I truly feel that medicine is changing very quickly. And it is specifically changing in terms of improving the access of underserviced populations. And you that have committed to work in rural and remote areas are going to feel that technological change very strongly over the next few years. So what I would like to do during this presentation is to give you a sense of the work that we have been doing in Saskatchewan over the past few years using these technologies. And specifically, kind of at the middle of my talk, focus a little bit on the issue of how we use this technology for surgery, and specifically for surgical mentoring. And our plan is to go to the operating room in Halifax and use some of this technology for you to have a sense of how it actually works in real life. So let me just start by telling you my disclosures. There's really no disclosures in terms of conflict of interest, but I want to acknowledge the generosity of my patients and the patient that is being operated today in Halifax, been in Saskatoon, that have given very generously consent for me to show their photographs and their videos and to live stream this portion of that surgery for that patient. So, as you know, the issue really is the issue of access. You know, if we look at the map of Canada, and if you draw a line here in Canada, you know, people that live north of that line have a hard time accessing healthcare, and you really are the best to know that. And not only, of course, critical care in emergencies or in acute situations, but really the primary health care. About 4 years ago, I moved to Saskatchewan. I was in Halifax for 19 years. And one of the reasons I moved to Saskatchewan was because I felt that Saskatchewan was an ideal province to really not only test this technology, but potentially scale it up to take care of a whole population. So as you know, Saskatchewan is there. And there's a few characteristics of Saskatchewan that are very important. When you look at the ratio between rural and urban population, almost 40% of the patients or the people that live in Saskatchewan live in rural areas. And when you look at the populations that are probably the most vulnerable populations, such as children, and you take a look and see where the children in Saskatchewan live. And this graph shows the two types of bars, the green and the yellow. And the yellow bar are communities that are less than 1,000 people. And if you look, for example, at this age group between 0 to 40 years, about 36% of the children of Saskatchewan between 0 and 40 years live in communities that are less than 1,000 people. And usually these communities that are less than 1,000 people are rural communities, and some of them are really remote communities. So again, an ideal area to see if technology can improve the access of this population. So the government of Saskatchewan, and this is the statistics from 2016, spends $83 million a year in transporting patients from all over the province to either Saskatoon and Regina. And when we look at the transportation of these patients, about 75% of these patients really didn't need to be transported if you can take care of them in their own communities that were not acute. So you can imagine a patient living here up in Stony Rapids that has had a knee surgery and that is being transported by air 3 hours to get to Saskatoon, go to see the orthopedic surgeon, who sees him in the office, looks at the wound, looks good, and asks them to move their knee and say, what's moving good? And that's it. Thank you. 5 minutes. And the tremendous issues that have to do with the effort to actually reach that location. So we've been using over this past few years these remote presence technology, and I'm showing you here these different machines that are the ones that we have been using to provide access to healthcare. And these are here a couple of robotic systems. This is a system that we use in the operating room and the one that we will activate in Saskatoon. And this is a portable system that works with regular cell phone connectivity. So these the difference of these systems of the regular standard telemedicine is that they can be accessed from any regular computer, iPad, or iPhone. And they work with regular communications infrastructure, either regular Wi-Fi or regular cell phone connectivity in terms of the networks. And in the way that these systems connect with what we call endpoints, which are, for example, in this case, a robot. This is a robot that has been deployed in one of the northern communities in Saskatchewan. The robot usually is parked on a hallway and is being charged by these chargers. The battery lasts about 8 hours. And if you need to contact and activate the robot, you just activate the robot and then you move it wherever you want to do. So you can go, for example, to the nursing station. For example, this morning from my room, I did rounds on my patients, and I saw 5 patients in the hospital. Some of them that I operated the past 2 days, and some people home. So I just go to the nursing station, grab a nurse and one of my residents, then go and see my patient, and then put the robot back where it is. So there's no human intervention in between. So I don't have to ask anybody that, turn the computer on, I'm gonna get in. That's why it's called remote presence. You're actually remotely present, and there's no intervention from anybody else in terms of activating some of the system and doing what you need to do. So this is the most sophisticated of the systems. This is an autonomous robot that has the whole layout of the hospital in its memory. You can imagine if you are consulted in a center that you don't know the layout, you don't know how to drive this robot, where you want to go. So you ask this robot to go to a specific room or the emergency room, and it will navigate on its own, will navigate through corridors with people and equipment. And once they reach the area, they can call you to your cell phone, and you can then activate and see the console. And this is exactly what I did this morning. The robots in our center have names, and I activated Patrick. And Patrick is the robot on the neurosurgical ward. And I saw one of my patients. You can see this lady had a craniotomy, and talked to her, and then we're able to discharge her. So these systems have, you can plug into these systems all these peripheral diagnostic tools that you may need, dermatoscopes, ophthalmoscopes, otoscopes. And we are now using the portable system, something that we call the dock in a box, to look at the emergency rooms and trauma. So you can take your doctor anywhere in your box. And then, so in this case, this is an important photograph. It was taken when we were first looking at the system and the usability of this system in emergency situations. So we trained some of the first responders, which were in this case firefighters, to plug a portable ultrasound system and plug this device, and then we will just direct them in terms of where to move the probe. And what we wanted to do was a fast ultrasound, so we can detect either air or fluid in the abdomen and see if that person had an acute abdominal injury. This is the photograph of a real case where they are doing an abdominal ultrasound on these patients that had an ATV accident. Of course, not only we can be in the scene of the accident, but we can monitor the patient while they're being transported to the emergency room. And we started a study in Saskatoon, and the preliminary results are that in terms, for example, of acute abdomen, we can shorten the distance and space, and we can have a preliminary diagnosis that has been really well correlated once the patient gets into the emergency room. And it is our impression that these really will save lives. We are using the system also for mobile home visits. So I feel that the idea of the physician doing a home visits will be coming back using this technology. And for example, these are some of my patients that I've seen them post-op, and I can examine them. In this case, we're programming one of their neuromodulation devices I can look at the wounds. And I just want to show you this short video to give you a sense of how we follow our patients. So this is a patient that I did a lumbar discectomy, and I sent her home 2 hours after the operation, and I'm just doing rounds the next day in her home. So we send her with this doc in a box, and she doesn't need to do anything. She just needs to push a button and turn the system on, and then we will then activate the system and communicate with her. So this is the next day after this lumbar discectomy. This lady had a dropped foot, and I'm seeing how she's doing. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yeah?
That's her husband taking pictures.
Good, good. Oh, you know, I'm like this.
Wonderful. And how are you doing? And then so what she does then after I'm not comfortable, she's doing well the first day after the surgery, and then she sends the doc in a box in the mail, and then can get back to us. So that has made a huge difference in terms of our ability to deal with the issue of the chronic shortage of beds. We had a lot of problems doing surgery because all our beds were full and couldn't admit patients. So we're doing this routinely now in Saskatoon. And the other thing, of course, we're using this now routinely to mentor our residents and medical students. And this is actually a case in the emergency room when one of the residents is doing a suture in the scalp of a patient. And we can see that and mentor them. And they're examining one of the victims here. Actually, it's a patient that was brain dead when she arrived. This is our remote medicine center at the University of Saskatchewan. And the amount of time that we need to train a physician to use this system is 45 minutes. Within 45 minutes, you are comfortable enough to actually use this system in clinical care. So it's very intuitively, there's really nothing to it. Everybody has used computers in the past. It is a matter of moving your mouse. And so we train now family physicians, psychiatrists, critical care physicians in our center, and we also train nurses as well. So I just want to show you now a little bit of the evidence. This is actually make a difference. Does it make a difference for the patients that are in these northern locations? So this is the little town of Pelican Narrows, which is in northern Saskatchewan. And Pelican Narrows has a nursing station. They don't have physicians there, they have nurses. And this was an ideal place to place one of these robots. So the first thing that we did is we looked and went to Pelican Narrows and asked nurses there, what was the area where they needed the most help? And they said, acutely ill children. So when a baby comes through the nursing station that is blue, that is not breathing well, so as soon as that baby is coming into the building, the nurses go to the telephone and ask for the transport team so they can come and get that baby back or that young child. And many, in the past few years, there's been several actually children that have been very sick, and some of them have died because the amount of time that it takes the plane to get there, even in perfect conditions, is an hour and a half to 2 hours. So what we did is we placed this robotic system in Pelican Narrows specifically to look at acutely ill children. And this is where Pelican Narrows is. This is a plain view of the town, and this is a typical town in northern Saskatchewan. It's a First Nations community. This is Dr. Tanya Holt, and Tanya is the head of the pediatric intensive care unit at the Saskatoon Health Region. And all the pediatric intensivists take call using the robot from any of the locations where we have deployment of the robot. And this is what she sees in her computer. And this is like a little video of an examination of the patient. And of course, we work very closely with the nurses in these northern remote communities or anywhere. Nurses are critical for this type of intervention using this technology.
I'll put on my headphones as well. Basically, you put on your headphones too, and then we can listen together. And then if you have any questions around what you're hearing, we can talk about that as well. Perfect.
So Tanya and Rachel at the same time, and you cannot hear the breath sounds because they're going directly to their headphones.
We're still hearing some wheezing.
So we've done this study where we placed this robot in Pelican Narrows, and then we had a control community as well in the north, similar location than Pelican Narrows, and then we did a study for about a year. So the first thing that I want to show you is, of course, the CTAS scores, and there's really no difference in terms of the acuity of the patients between the robot community and the control community. When we look at the transportation of the patients, 100% of the patients from the control community have been transported to Saskatoon. And this is, of course, the standardized, the default thing. Physicians are very uncomfortable treating patients over the phone without having layouts on the patient. In terms of the robot community intervention, only 37% of the patients were transported. That means that 63% of the patients were able to be taken care in Pelican Narrows using the robot. And these, whatever the intervention was sustainable. As part of this, we did a follow-up of 2 weeks and 4 weeks, and none of the children that were treated using the robot needed to come back to Saskatoon. So that means that that intervention was sustainable. Now, the other issue is that if you get into Saskatoon, even if you don't need to, it takes you about 5 days to get back to your community. You know, you don't transport a kid on a plane and then send them back immediately, even if they don't need it. Once they get admitted, it takes you 5 days. And of course, there was no admission into the community. The other thing that we were able to do is of the 37% of the patients that were transported, we were able to regionalize about 42% to Prince Albert. So they didn't even need to come to Saskatoon to the pediatric intensive care unit. They could be taken care safely in the pediatric ward on Prince Albert. So when we look at some of the cost effectiveness of these, one of these RP7 robots, at the time when we bought it was about $70,000, probably it's less now. Every time we send a plane, it's about $10,000. So over a period of this 13-month study, we avoided 24 transports, which is about $240,000 for transport, and we avoided hospital beds on admission for about $120,000. For in 13 months, we save about $360,000 of the system, enough to buy about 5 robots. So that is what the government really understands. And now the remote presence program in Saskatchewan is fully funded by the government of Saskatchewan. And we didn't even take into account the issue of family, travel accommodations, also productivity and so forth. How do the children like the robot? They love the robots because they can stay home and they don't have to travel to Saskatoon. So let me just now go into the issue of surgical mentoring, which is, of course, an area of interest of you. So we are using this system called the Banff system. And the Banff system has a number of features. It has this boom camera that allows us to focus on the surgical operating field. It has this other camera that allows to really look at the surgical environment. And then it is very helpful, and you hopefully will see it when we connect to Saskatoon. So in 2016, we did 217 cases of mentoring to residents in neurosurgery, and this is the breakdown on the different procedures that we did. So here I am just to show you, we're doing one of the functional cases, and this is a neurosurgeon from China that has beamed up into my operating room and is looking and participating in terms of communicating with us of the operation. They have a really excellent view of the surgical field. And here I am supervising and mentoring one of my residents. You know, the residents like that, although they feel that you're still watching over their shoulders, you're not breathing down their neck. And that is really something that has, you know, given them this extra freedom. And we're just finalizing this study and seeing how beneficial it is for mentoring without the principal surgeon being physically there, but actually being in control of all the surgical procedure. We have not only used this specific system for mentoring, but we also have used the robot. And here I'm using the robot to mentor one of my residents and even the doc in a box. So we've been trying all these systems for surgical mentoring, and we feel that they are good enough. The ability to not only look, for example, at the imaging, and this is a case for functional neurosurgery, what the surgeon is doing itself, looking, for example, at the monitor of the anesthetist, the surgical field is exquisite, and hopefully we will be able to demonstrate this today. But we are going even beyond that, beyond the use of this mentoring system, and we are using augmented reality. I know Stu has sent a video as part of your package about a TED Talk on augmented reality, and we've been trying this for some time. You can see here, there is a hand here in the surgical field. It has no glove. That is because this hand is not from anybody here present in the operating room, but from this guy that is sent his hand to the operating room in a virtual reality augmented way. And here it is with his colleagues watching the operation that we're doing. And here I'm just going to show you how it actually looks. I'm here holding a needle driver and a forceps. And you can see here my hands holding those on top of the real wound of the patient. I'll show you this video that will give you a little bit of a sense of how this augmented reality works. I can see you well. Are you thinking of the yeah, that's what we're doing. It's a little bit smaller than the 2 feet. But I can see you well. We're going to open the door for you guys to. You see those up? Okay, so this is again to orient you. This is the rostrum. Yes. This is called. This is a spine surgery. So just looking at the spinous process. So you can say, well, big deal, you can do the same thing with a pointer. But the key issue of this augmented reality is to demonstrate a surgical maneuver without needed to talk and demonstrate it in real time. So I'm just going to show you here again a small video of the connection. As you know, I'm a functional neurosurgeon and I put a lot of these DBS electrodes, which are connected with a cable that is connected with a pulse generator. And we're connecting the pulse generator, and my hands are here without gloves, and I'm showing you my resident how to connect this pulse generator, and this is real time. And my resident has his hands in the surgical field. You can see he kind of mimics what I'm doing. So in a way, what it is this, you can show a maneuver on real time. and it's becoming something that of potential use in terms specifically of mentoring. This is the Royal University Hospital in Saskatoon and the Faculty of Medicine, and we're going to go to this building. This is Dr. Julia Radic, who's a neurosurgeon, and she's doing right now a case of a brain tumor. Actually, she's doing an open biopsy, and hopefully we'll connect with her. So I'm just gonna go back and change a little bit the systems, and then I'll connect back. So I'm connecting with the system in the operating room. So this is real time in the operating room in Saskatoon. And hi, Julia, can you hear me? I'm just going to give you a little bit more volume. So Julia just starting actually the case, and she's prepping the patient. Julia, just go ahead and do what you need to do, and I'm just going to get the boom camera. Yeah. So I'm actually now looking at the boom camera. So I see what Julia is doing, and I'm just going to focus here. So she's actually prepping now. And while she's doing that, I'm gonna talk to the, I'm gonna go and see the instrument. Hi, how are you doing? All right, so you can see here the craniotome. I'll take a look at here at the monitor of the anesthetist. This is Luis. So, and I'm just going to do something here. I'm gonna show you a little bit of the telestration capacity. I'm gonna take a picture of this. Okay, and I'm going to actually draw, and I'm gonna let Julia do what she's doing, but I'm gonna draw here something. And I'm just gonna ask Julia. Julia, I don't know if you can see the monitor here a little bit. Is that the incision here you're gonna make? Julia? Julia, can you hear me? Can you, yeah, okay. All right. Okay, I'm just gonna take a picture of that. Julia, do you think the tumor is right there where I put my red mark? Okay. All right. I'm gonna move it a little bit. So you can see which you probably like is. We'll just wait for a second, and I'm just going to see when Julia starts actually making the incision. We'll be back in a second, and then let me just finish, and I'll come back to the operating room and see where Julia is. I just got interrupted on the internet here for a second. So you kind of been able to see the resolution of the system here. Let me just go to talk a little bit about what I feel new technology, what is actually coming down the pipe. One of the things that we're very excited is that the use of remote ultrasonography. One of the big areas of underservice in northern Saskatchewan is the access to ultrasound. And patients have to travel all the way to Saskatoon to get an ultrasound, and especially prenatal ultrasound. So we're trying this new system where the experts that could be in Saskatoon will be able to do an ultrasound on a patient wherever that patient is. And this is how it actually looks. So the person that is grabbing this frame doesn't need to have any expertise, and she's not moving the probe. The person that is moving the probe is here in his office, and he is actually moving the probe. And every movement that he does with the probe is recreated on real time on the other side. So there's really no lag in terms of the movement of the probe, and they can do very sophisticated things, such as a full prenatal ultrasound examination, as well as Doppler. She's using the Doppler here. So we've been doing the comparison between direct ultrasonography and remote ultrasonography. And we just published a paper in 2017 that shows that there's really no difference in terms of the accuracy of both the standard and the remote ultrasonography. And here, for example, this is a study looking at the measurements of fetal ultrasonography. And there's really no difference between the telerobotic and the conventional ultrasonography. For example, biparietal diameter, femur length, and all that is really exactly the same. So we're now deploying for the first time 2 remote ultrasonography systems, one in a community called La Loge, and the other one in a community called Stony Rapids. And they will be now starting to do ultrasonography in their own communities by the radiologists in Saskatoon. And then we're using the Google Glass, which is coming back for this specific wearable device that instead, for example, of any of these robots, can we actually use a wearable device where the nurse or the physician on the other side can wear the Google Glass and can transmit directly to us. And this is the case here. This is one of the nurses that is talking to one of my patients. This is the imaging of that patient. And here I am in a different location. I can see what the conversation is. I can intervene, talk to the patient directly, talk to the nurse, look at the x-rays, and examine the patient. So this is a wound after we've done a spine surgery, and I can see that perfectly well. And we are now looking at the issue of telepalpation. Can we actually touch a patient at a distance, and can we palpate the abdomen? We're developing this glove that will allow us to actually examine a patient at a distance. So very exciting developments in terms of the ability to do things. So let me just go back to Saskatoon and see where Julia is, and I'll connect again. So we'll take a look and see where the internet is. Of course, everything is internet dependent, and the internet that we had here in the we'll try to use the Wi-Fi directly, the one that you're using now. Yeah, so the Wi-Fi for that is actually not working that well. Let me just go to this. Everything that you have here in terms of the green robots that are available to us. So I'm just going to go to the Regina Hospital. And I'm going to activate one of the robots so you can have a sense. Yeah. Oh. Is it? Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see if we can go to the Regina Hospital. So this is now using Wi-Fi. What I was using before to the surgery was the cable system. So this is the robot so this is real time in the Regina Hospital. As you can show you, the robot is in the park, in the corridor. There's a patient there. Hi, how are you doing, guys? Nobody pays attention to me anymore. So I'm going to activate the system. So I'm going to go to the nursing station. Hi, how are you doing? All right, I'm just going to go around and visit you for a second. So this is with your regular Wi-Fi communication. I'm going to go inside the nursing station now.
Hello.
How are you? Very well. Thank you. I'm actually in Banff now. How is the weather there in Regina?
It's nice today.
Is it?
It was just -40, but now it's going to be +7.
Okay, that's good. I'm just going to demonstrate a little bit the capacity of the Zoom of this system.
Okay.
So you can see I'm actually reading from here what is in her desk. Hours of operation, and you can see I'm just going to even look at this core bath. It's a pretty good zoom, and I'm just going to go back. So you have perfect mobility with the system, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and, do you see this? Robot parking only. And I'm just going to go and then park the robot. I'll just get to disconnect and I'll dock it. So there's a laser on the back of the robot and then the robot will align to the laser on the back. And then it will park. And then once it's parked, I can disconnect. So basically what I demonstrated to you is that we can go to the operating room in Saskatoon. We can go to Regina at a click of a mouse. And I think this is where the value of this connectivity is without the intervention of a human being. This is why it's called remote presence. So let me just finish there, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I think we have time for one or two questions. If it's how to use parallel park the robot, we'll leave that for break. How about that?
Yeah.
I just have a question. I just noticed the process is a little bit different. It's a little bit more time consuming. And in medicine, it's a fee for service world. How do you mitigate that?
Yeah. So usually what happens is, again, at the beginning, you know, the interaction of turning on the system and how do you actually book a clinic. So at the beginning, there is an increase in terms of the time that you need to get used to the robot, get used to how the robot interacts with your patient and so forth. Now what we've done, like in my clinic, I actually book the remote presence clinics as part of my regular clinic. And I see, for example, 60% of my patients on the regular clinic, and then I continue the workflow using the remote presence in the office. So it hasn't really changed after a while. The clinic time and my workflow, but it has made a huge difference for my patient. My patient doesn't need to travel 3 or 4 hours. They don't need to drive in difficult conditions. What this technology is doing is switching these physician center. You know, I know it's a fee for service. You know, we tend to do the things that are convenient for us, that are facilitate our work, but sometimes we forget the implications for those patients. So what it has actually made a difference is on that patient that doesn't have to take that plane and spend 3 days so they can see me in the office in 5 minutes. So I think to me that is what compensates a little bit of the issue of using the technology and maybe disturbing your workflow a little bit. But overall, once you use this as a routine procedure, you get used to it as anything. Yeah. So usually, you know, because we work, this is a hotel. The internet is very variable because it is variable because of the amount of people that are using it right now, and it takes the bandwidth. So what we do when we work on the hospital is we have a dedicated internet connection from our hospital to any of these remote locations. As you can see, the internet was variable when we went to the operating room at the end because of the usage here. But once you are within the medical center, we have a dedicated line. And over the period of the hundreds of cases that we did in 2016, there was not even one time where the internet fell. What I'm trying to demonstrate is that if you now take your cell phone and you Skype, you're going to have some loss of audiovisual connectivity. But what we did here with the same internet that everybody has, you were not only able to maintain the connectivity, but to actually manipulate a mechanical system, which is a robot. So that shows you that even with the very restricted internet connectivity, you have optimization of the signal to be able to move a machine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mendez. Amazing.
Thank you.
very much. Amazing. You're going to be here for the whole day, right? Yeah?
You know,
Well, when do you leave?
actually, immediately after this.
Okay.
And as you can see, we're at one end of the spectrum, and
That's amazing. You can understand, or I'm starting to understand why Canada is leading the way in some of this technology. I also have Mendes if he was going to be around for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, he does have to leave. But as you can see, he can't hide. We can find him no matter where he is. And so thank you very much for all of your work and your advocacy for the girl communities in Canada. All right, so moving on, we have our next speaker who has the title of the talk, which makes sense to all of us in the room. OMG, what just happened? The day in the OR you never want to have. We have Dr. Pinar here. Marius Pinar is a South African trained generalist obstetrician and gynecologist. For the past 25 years, he's been the solo obstetrician and gynecologist specialist in Prince Rupert, British Columbia. For those who don't know British Columbia, Prince Rupert is on the northwest coast. It's on sort of from the same latitude as Prince George, but all the way over on the coast. It gets nailed with some nasty weather. And he serves not only Prince Rupert, but the entire Haida Gwaii region, which has to travel to get up to him, and the many First Nation villages around Prince Rupert that are incredibly not only rural, that would be easy, but the remote nature of those communities is certainly a challenge. But he is also a great advocate for the work-play balance. So I don't know how he does it, maybe he can give us some hints, but he's an enthusiastic skier, adventure motorcyclist, and a kite server, amongst other things. So come on up, Dr. Pinar, and share your wisdom with us.
While we're waiting for the technology to kick in, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's certainly an open slate that I was given, and I'm sure we've all in our lives experienced our fair share of train smashes in the operating room, and that's what I'm going to focus on. Maybe. So I do, thinking of last night's talk, I do live rurally, I do live remotely, and 50% of my population is First Nations, and I do live in the north. I certainly come from the trenches, and there will be no p-values or any 95% confidence intervals in this talk today. If I can do one thing in this talk, it would be to give you one single something that you're going to remember for that day when you're alone in the operating room when things go wrong. You can go, wasn't there that thing about the water that you can put into the vagina to pop it in? You can remember that one thing today that I've achieved my goal. That's the purpose. So Prince Rupert is the center of the universe. It's a beautiful little town. I've been there for 25 years. I came straight from residency in Cape Town to this little island in the Pacific. My family have an image of a hula hula girls and palm trees, which is not quite true. It does have a train smash history, if I can touch on it. This guy here is Charles Hayes. He was the boss of the Grand Pacific Railroad trunk, and he wanted to build a trans-Canada railway line to Prince Rupert rather than to Vancouver, because we are one day sailing closer to the east. And he ran out of money, and he went to Europe and actually got money and chose the wrong transport to come back. Yeah. And hence Vancouver became the first connection out to the east rather than Prince Rupert. We only got a railway a few years later. There's only one road out of town, so my wife and I are keen motorcyclists, and we have to ride 8 hours before we can decide are we going to turn left or right this time. And Prince George, which is our big center, is 8 hours away if the roads allow it in winter. There's only one place where you can go from our airport, and we have 6 specialists, one general surgeon and one orthopedic surgeon, and a very necessary psychiatrist, as well as an internist and a pediatrician. We have a whole bunch of South African GPs. I think we've got 2 Canadians, the rest are all South African. Don't ask me why. So, back to today's topic. The day you don't want to have an operating room. Let's start before getting to the operating room. I'm going to try and give you a few tips on these 4 topics to see if you can stay out of the operating room. And if this is going to be a hodgepodge of ideas, please feel free at any time to intervene, to ask a question while we're going, and to make any comments if you agree or disagree or need any clarification. So this is not going to be obstetrics course, but let's start with breech deliveries, how to stay out of the operating room. Hopefully none of you are, or very few of you will be doing breech deliveries these days, and even the residents don't get trained to it. It's just the old folks like myself that still do breech deliveries by choice. However, most of you in this room will, at some stage, if you do obstetrics, run into an unplanned breech delivery, breech that's 8 centimeters dilated and get swirled into the room, and you're the one. I know what it feels like to be the final person standing there in the trenches. There's nobody else to turn to. You could have solved the problem. You're going to forget it if you haven't done it for a long, long period of time, what to do with that breech. Forget about the Maurice Smelly bite maneuver or the pin-out maneuver, all the rest. Just remember these 2 things. If you can remember anything to stay out of the operating room. Number 1, do not have the baby facing the roof. If you have the baby's body coming out with the chin getting stuck between the symphysis pubis, there's just no way where that head can turn on the sacrum, and it will be absolutely 100% stuck. So remember only the breech deliveries. Keep the back of the baby facing to the roof. Number 2, don't pull the baby. Let things happen spontaneously. Don't rupture membranes. Don't intervene. Just support. You'll be surprised, and those of you who have delivered breech babies, you'll be surprised how easily it happens most of the time, despite all the horror stories that you hear. But sometimes these horror stories do happen. The 2 things that do happen that are most scary in my mind is if you have ruptured membranes early on, don't rupture those membranes, and you have a cord prolapse, you can still solve that situation. The scariest one of them all is if the head is stuck after the body has been delivered. I've only seen this once when I was a resident with a fellow resident delivering, with a pink baby coming out, kicking, head stuck, kicking, blue, and dying in his hands while he's sweating away trying to get that head out and not being able to do so. What the heck do you do in that situation? And this is where you come in, because I'm sure they will call the local surgical expert, which will be you. So, if the head of there's only 2 things in obstetrics that scare me. There's a lot of things that scare me that really scare me. One is when this head is stuck, and the second one is severe postpartum hemorrhage. If you have a head that is stuck and you cannot get it out, and you've tried the Maurice Smelly bite, you can remember it, 3 hands kind of thing, and you've tried all the tricks in the world, and that head doesn't come out. What do? You have a choice between symphysiotomy and Zaffanelli procedure, and I think it's good to just know of these things and to know basically how to do them, although hopefully you will never ever need them. Off the record is IV Ventolin, a big favorite of mine, and you also have nitroglycerine to try and relax that uterus to give you a little bit of time to think. IV Ventolin, in South Africa, we used to have exoprenoline here. When I got here 25 years ago, we had exobar beta stimulants that have disappeared. If you have never done this before, get yourself some IV Ventolin in your maternity unit or in your hospital. You won't hear of of it from any of the guys in the ivory towers. It saved my butt many, many times. Most recently, when I had to fly with Learjet to the Queen Charlotte Islands for a breach that was stuck, and I was stuck for 7 hours before a helicopter could come and get us and medevac the patient out. And I sat there with the one box of IV Ventolin, giving this lady small little doses intermittently, relaxing at the uterus until the sun came out and the helicopter could come and get us. If you need the dosage, don't try and remember it, phone me and I'll tell you about it. It's a small amount. You basically put a monitor on the lady's finger, and as soon as you get her heart up to 120 beats per minute, there will be no uterine contractions. It's like magic. Maybe you have a scary moment in the delivery room and you need to get to the operating room and this baby is in deep trouble. Got it handy, give her that little bit, just don't give too much. We don't have to talk about the dosage right now. You can magic away contractions for 15 minutes just to get you time to breathe and get her down to the operating room. I've less experience with nitroglycerine, but I have used it similarly. Okay, so symphysiotomy. Scary thing, we used to do this in Africa to try and avoid cesarean sections with the disaster of women in very rural, primitive areas having to have a second cesarean section, or if they can't get to a medical facility, having uterine rupture. It's become very rare to use it today, but it might save your butt in your small rural town. It's not as difficult as you think. What you're basically going to do is make sure that you don't make a cut in the ureter. And to do that, you put a catheter in there, you use local anesthetic over the symphysis, you put your finger in the vagina, you're not going to cut your own finger, so that also protects the mom to a degree. You're going to push the ureter out of the way. You're simply going to make a small incision through the skin and cut through the symphysis, because it's not as tough as you think. Cook, and you get an extra 2 centimeters, you might get the head out. This was used for British presenting infants, as I say, in the African situation. I don't think in our situation it's a true place for a head. Remember of a breech. Remember that head is pushing the cord against the pelvic rim, and that baby is not getting any oxygen if you do not have it. Scary scenario. This was used in Ireland in the days when the church had a lot of say in matters, and basically they did compassionate hysterectomies after 3 C-sections. So a lot of women without their consent were given symphysiotomies instead of cesarean sections to try and allow them to have more kids. Without their consent, and there's been a big protest against it. I just read about 1,200 women have already been paid. I think a lot of this is not quite true. That they write a lot of things about the chronic pain that they have and difficulty with their hips. Generally, my experience is women recover pretty darn well after bed rest for just a few days. And it's rare that you have to get an orthopedic surgeon to go and sew those bones together again. Most of the time, you have to do nothing. The other thing that you must know as a rural surgeon is how to do a Zaffanelli maneuver. I have never done one. I hope never to do one. Just think how horrendous it is. It's mostly used for shoulder dystocia. If that fetal head is delivered and you have the tunnel sign of the head pulling in and you can't get the shoulders out. I'm not going to go through that, all the wood screws and McRoberts maneuvers, and you just simply cannot get those shoulders out. And you can't collapse the shoulders with fracturing the clavicles. While it's been very well described and successfully described on how to flex that head in the operating room with your uterine relaxant, slowly push the head up with an assistant and then do a cesarean section to deliver this baby. Doing it with a breech has been described. There's a few cases in the literature. I saw about 40 in total, so it's a very scarce procedure, but it can be life-saving for the baby. However, the maternal and fetal mortality are very, very high, so I hope that you never have to do this. But just remember, you know, if we're stuck and we can't do anything else, and especially if the baby's still alive, if the baby's not alive, it doesn't matter. If the baby's alive, just remember, hey, what about pushing this baby back and doing a C-section? So you rupture those membranes when you, yep.
You haven't mentioned Gerson incisions. You didn't mention Gerson incisions.
Go ahead.
Or cutting the cervix at 10 and 2.
Yes, that would be for a non-fully dilated cervix. We have to do that. So if you have a cervix that's not fully dilated, I'm basically talking about somebody who's already fully dilated. But you're right. So if you, one of the problems with the breaches is you could have the baby being delivered with the cervix not. That's why I say don't want to deliver that head until the cervix 10 centimeters. So basically, if the baby does slip through, the head is stuck, but there's still cervix there. You can cut the cervix normally at 10 and 2 o'clock. Difficult. Can you say that again? Piper's forceps you can use, but you know what? I'll get to forceps in a moment. Forceps are difficult to use in the first place. And Piper's forceps with the breech is very difficult to use if you have no experience with forceps. And I think most units don't have Piper's, although you can use some forceps as well for a breech. But yes, I would use forceps, but I don't think very many people in this audience would. Okay, so you have a cord prolapse. So this is the cervix is not fully dilated, you did your vaginal examination, boom, the cord falls out. What the heck do you do now? Be very quick on this. Do not fiddle with the cord. Try gently to replace it. If you cannot do it, oh well, take it to the operating room. There are rare instances where you can deliver vaginally. This would be the breech. The second of the breech, the cervix is already fully dilated, and you've got a breech-presenting infant that's baby number 2. You can do a breech extraction if you know how to do that. Or if the head's really low, unlikely that you're going to have a cord prolapse, but a vaginal delivery can be the quickest way out sometimes. However, if you have to take it to the operating room, the trick is, of course, to put her in the chest knee position. Once again, you don't want pressure of the head against the pelvic rim, putting pressure on that cord. Don't fiddle with the cord. Put your hand up in the vagina, push that head up away from the rim. If you have time and there's a catheter in there, fill it up, take it to the operating room. No prep. Anesthetist is going to give you a crash induction. Hand still in the vagina, flip her around, just take a scalpel, no instrument counts, go in there and deliver that baby immediately. This reminds me of, once again, Africa doing a prenatal clinic in a very rural setting with relatively primitive population. And seeing a woman at a previous C-section, I asked her, so Mama, why did you have this cesarean section? Why did they do the C-section? This was in Afrikaans, and she said, was the baby stuck? And she said, no, the baby wasn't stuck. The doctor, he put his hand in my vagina, and it was stuck. And they had to do an operation to get his hand out. I knew where that came from. Not very good communication voice there. Okay, from our BC data, instrument deliveries, never use 2 instruments. If your vacuum fails, don't use a forceps. If your forceps fails, don't use a vacuum. Do a cesarean section. Cesarean section is a fantastic operation. It's a fantastic operation. Don't ever, sorry, Jen, you're not supposed to hear this. Don't ever, in a situation, think of what is my statistics, what is our percentage. Just go ahead and do this fantastic operation when you're in trouble. Nobody asks you why you did the C-section. Never use 2 instruments. Never use any mid-pelvic instruments anymore. We don't use them anymore. It's much safer to do the cesarean section. And stick to the rules. If you're doing a vacuum and it's 20 minutes, and it's 3 contractions, and it's 3 pop-offs, stop. Do not push your limits. Get the operating room mobilized while you're trying to vacuum. And sometimes with that first pull already, I know, this ain't moving, just stop right there. Forceps, basically, I think are going out of vogue. The older guys like me still use them, but very few people do. And if you're not very smooth at them, if you don't practice them regularly, forget about the forceps, just stick to the vacuum. Uterine inversion, I have had the experience to run into this situation a few times, and you do unexpectedly. I had a call not too long ago from my cabin, from a guy from Kirimat, which is 35 kilometers down the road. And he said, a South African guy, he said, I just delivered a baby, this uterus popped out. You know, is this serious? Hell yes, it's serious. It's terrible. As I'm speaking to you, I'm getting in my car, you know, get the OR ready. Get the labs, get the second IV going, get some blood. This is a true obstetrical emergency. You're hopefully never going to see it. If you have the opportunity, if it happens right there and you push right back with your hand, you might be able to pop this uterus back. If you cannot, this is the one little image that you should take away with you today to remember in that moment 10 years from now. Think of the O'Sullivan's hydrostatic method. This is how it works. You have 3 bags of saline with normal cysto tubing. The tubes run openly into your hand with the cocks turned off. You put your hand in the vagina. You get the nurse to put her hand, maybe 2 people put their hands on the vulva around it, and you open the water. That's it. And you just wait, and those 3 bags of saline will eventually pop the uterus back into position. It's surprisingly difficult if you've waited a few minutes to put that uterus back, because the cervix seems to clamp down around it. It's very difficult. You think you can just push it back. Not so easy. But the hydrostatic method, and you'll be surprised how much volume can go into that vagina and uterus before it pops here. But just keep running the saline and eventually will fall down. If it doesn't, you have to do a laparotomy, and that's what it looks like. Now you think, well, it's very easy when I'm there. I'll just follow those round ligaments and pull them up. They're pretty fragile, and it's not so easy to do. Try if somebody's hand from below it while you're pulling from. It's not likely to do it. This is the second thing you have to remember. If you don't forget the water and the pipes, remember this. You make an incision at the back of the uterus. You can put a little Army and Navy in there and try and pull the fungus out. It's surprisingly difficult to do sometimes. Okay, we're going to talk about this later on the panel today. I'm just going to touch on a few surgical aspects of obesity and the system of today in the operating room. You don't want to have, we're all having it more and more and more, and there'll be more on this later today. I just want to give a few tips. One is a Mobius retractor. The one thing that you need when you're working on a very obese patient is you need extra hands. Get help, get an extra guy to work with that penis. This certainly helps. I've been using it lately. It's not that expensive. It's basically a tube that you fold, you put into the abdomen, and you roll it up. And as you roll it up, it basically opens the wound. It does sort of help you get away with one less person. I've also had to do a cesarean section like this without an assistant, just because rural situations sometimes you don't have it. This is a fantastic thing that I found recently. I've just used it a few times. It works. And I wish I had thought of it. That's what it looks like, and I hope to have a small video clip. Let's see if I can get it running. Nope, that didn't work. Okay, the traxi is basically a sticky plastic. You pull the tummy up. It can be done after or before the prep. You pull the tummy, the penis up, you stick it on. It literally takes 30 seconds. You peel off the back, and you go, and you stick it at the top. And it takes all that weight away from that guy retracting it. It's not expensive. You know, thinking of last night's talk, trying to close the gap, I always think about equipment in Prince Rupert where I work, and I think about Prince George and all the fancy stuff. And we always get the hand-me-downs, the second best ultrasound machine there. We're always trying to keep it up. And maybe 15 years ago, I decided this is nonsense. If there's one thing that I need is I need better equipment than those guys in Prince George who have a urologist to flick their fingers to come and bail them out. I could stay out of trouble. And I have to have the best of everything. And I do now today. There's nothing I want as far as laparoscopic surgery goes. Maybe a robotic system in the future, but at the moment, nothing I want. Same here. Don't let money ever stop you. You can use those 4 magic words from last night's talk. You can get money. Get this stuff. It's going to help you. Stick it on the panels, pull the panels up. Don't worry about the cost of it. Compared to what they do for those probes that they just discard in the big cities, we can use all the money in the world. It does work to pull that panels away. Ah, there we go. I think we've got movement. It's not quite robotic surgery, I'm sorry. You get the idea. You stick it up. Okay. For obese patients, remember double dose of antibiotics. Just new off the presses, that you might not have heard anywhere else yet. Most people use ANSEF, use it 2 grams instead of 1 for obese patients. For all your patients these days, if you do cesarean sections after rupture of membranes, there are new studies out from last year that shows that we have to use azithromycin a gram as well, preoperatively, added to your ANSEF. If you're doing your cesarean section, if there's a fat layer in any cesarean section more than 2 centimeters, you need to put a fat layer of suture in there. Get longer instruments. In fact, have your operating room have a special pack for these patients. There's no place for a drain according to Cochrane reviews. And the most important thing, I think, is the mobilizing afterwards. Make sure that you use headrooms. I use automatic pneumatic stockings. I'm not sure if all of you have that, but please use compression stockings. Mobilize, hydrate, get them moving. Think of DVT. We'll talk about Sylvie's spatial spectrum today. What to do at vaginal, at cesarean section if you cannot get, you've tried your vacuum, baby didn't come out, you're taking it to the operating room and it's stuck deep inside. Any tips on how to deliver that head at cesarean section? Yes, get somebody to push up. We all know that trick. Remember to do a J incision. So if you make a transverse incision, don't go extending it because you're going into the uterine arteries on the side. Just do a J up to the one side. Don't use a T. A T feels very much like a classical and forces a cesarean section next time. When you're standing there, I'm right-handed, put your left hand in to pull that head up and not your right hand. Not my stronger hand, because with my right hand at the cesarean section, I'm more likely to do this and roll. With my left hand flat, holding onto the head, I can use my right hand and pull that head out of the pelvis. So use a flat hand to try and avoid tears to the sides. I sometimes use one blade over forceps, which is smaller than my hand, to help scoop that baby's head out. Have a kiwi retractor in every operating room. If that head just can't get it out of that incision, try the kiwi. I did it recently for big vaginal laparoscopic cyst that I removed, ovarian cyst. So this is within the past 2 weeks, and couldn't get it through the mini laparotomy. And I said, hey, we have a vacuum retractor. I pulled the ovarian cyst out of the abdomen. The nurses thought that was pretty cool. And relax the uterus, of course, while you're struggling to get that head out. I know it can be pretty scary and daunting. If you are delivering a baby, you're not quite sure which way the baby's, and you're putting your hand in there, you've all been in that situation, feeling around, what the hell do I have? Where am I going to pull? How's this baby coming out transverse like? And you get an arm out of the, falling out of the incision. Don't ever be tempted to do anything with that arm. You cannot deliver this baby arm first. Put it back, turn, grab something else, not an arm. Don't ever grab an arm. Okay, lateral tears, I know Jan's going to talk about this, I'm not going to touch much on that. When you make a little incision on the uterus during your cesarean section, don't go sharply to the sides, tear. I recently saw a review that said tearing like I often do this way is more likely to tear into the uterine arteries than making your horizontal incision and tear it this way. Doesn't make sense, but I've tried it, it works. Do that, and apparently we will have statistically less lateral tears. And when you're repairing, the ureter is not far away, the water runs under the bridge. I often put my hand, if you have lateral tears, I put my hand behind the uterus. I do externalize the uterus. Do not ever feel ashamed. The good guys in the ivory towels will tell you sometimes that you've got to move the uterus in the abdomen. Don't feel ashamed to take it out. Do what's natural and what's comes easily for you. So lift the uterus out, put your hand behind it, and if you have your one hand behind while you're suturing, you will not dig the ureter. That's just to show where the uterine arteries are. We know they come from the side and they run up and down. So basically, you don't want to go to the sidelines with your J incisions. Okay, so what about, I wonder if anybody will admit to this. Has anybody ever delivered a baby during cesarean section through the upper vagina? Done that. Long, long, long labor, stretched out, and you think you're going through the transfer due to low. No big deal, the baby can be delivered this way. But my personal scandal that I talk about was as a resident, transverse incision high enough. This woman was about 8 centimeters dilated and got the baby out. And as I started doing a beautiful suture on the lower segment, put it all together and cleaning up all the blood and stuff. And then something in the anatomy didn't make sense. And I could put my hand from the uterus into the vagina. And what I'd done is I had sewed the posterior lip of the cervix as the lower segment onto the upper uterus. So these things happen. Just be aware of the little mistake you made. I've never done it after my residency, I dare say. Keep in mind that the cervix is a strange looking organ in labor and could look like the lower segment you're looking for. Okay, bladder. So short things that go wrong, things you don't want to happen. What do you do if you hit a bladder? Don't panic. Bladders are forgiving organs. We always close them very neatly in 2 layers. Have you seen a urologist do it? They don't give a damn about bladder. Just put it back together again. And it's a scary feeling. You know, you're a young surgeon, you're just working there, and suddenly you see this folding catheter bulb, and you go, oh, It's not a problem. Ureter is a different story, and it's a tricky thing to put together. Don't, especially when there's blood and stuff around. If you think you've dinged the ureter, just finish your operation, close up, send it to your urologist. You've got time. Even if you put stitches through it, you've got enough time to get compression. Send her away. Bowel injury, not difficult. These days, primary closure, Vicryl does the trick for anybody. Our general surgeon wants the latest 1 or 2 layer. He says it goes both ways. He now does just 1 layer closures, continuous running Vicryl. Don't even think about the direction. They say you should do this one. I always forget what I'm standing there. Just close the damn thing. If there's contamination of bowel content, then irrigate. If there's very little contamination, then don't irrigate and don't put a drain. Okay, abnormal placentation. This is the real train smashes that we have in the operating room as obstetricians. The placenta previous, when I do the cesarean section, especially the elective ones, I absolutely want to know where that placenta is before I go in. So I always look around with ultrasound myself, and all of you have the technology now to go look at the original images, find out what a placenta looks like, and try and avoid it. Go a little bit high, go a little bit more to the one side. Occasionally, I even do classical incisions for it. But we've all run into the situation where you're doing a cesarean section, and boom, I'm on a placenta that I didn't expect. What the hell do I do now? This thing is bleeding. Well, the answer is don't stop. Don't be intimidated with the blood loss. Don't try and control the bleeding. Just go in there, because you're losing baby blood as well, and this baby can lose 80 bleeding. You want to go through that placenta as fast as you can. You want to get your hand into that abdomen, you want to grab a loop of cord and tie it or clamp it. Then take a deep breath, get the baby out, and then try and deal with the mess afterwards. So don't stop. Don't be afraid to just go through that placenta full steam if you have to. This is the one that is becoming more and more scary with increasing cesarean section rates. If you have had 2 previous cesarean sections and you have a low-lying placenta, you have a 40% chance of having some degree of a preterm. If you have a prenatal patient who has had 2 previous cesarean sections and the placenta is reported as low, phone the radiologist and say, can you have a very careful look at that image and tell me if I'm dealing with a preterm or not, because you don't want to touch that preterm. If there's a placenta preterm, get this patient to send elsewhere. That's what it looks like. It is a horrible, horrible thing. And as you know, if you have true preterm, it goes into the bowels and the bladder, and it's not something. If you open up an abdomen and it's not, the baby's not dying, and you see this, oh my God, what am I dealing with? This is placenta and abnormal placentation all over. If the baby's not dying, if this was an elective cesarean section, close her, send her away. Do not touch Equita if you don't have to. If you have to, you're ready to do a hysterectomy, and even then, what are you going to do with that infiltrated bowel and bladder? You know, in the big cities, they have a wall of blood, and they have 5 surgeons down the hall and 3 in the room. You don't want to deal with it in our situation. If you can, I don't want to deal with it in consumption. If you come across a fibroid, don't be tempted. Leave them alone. Those others are super vascularized in pregnancy. Leave them alone. Ovarian cysts, you might, depending if it looks angry, take a biopsy. You could always get an obstetrician or gynecologist online and ask them, hey, I've got this thing. And we have the robot technology so that you can zoom them right into this tumor and they can give you advice remotely. Near the end. Amniotic fluid embolism, close this woman up, help the anesthetist. It's unexpected shortness of breath. It's not a surgical problem. Quickly get that baby out because the resuscitation is going to be easier. Close the uterus in 1 layer, do a very quick 1 layer closure of the abdomen and help the anesthetist. Same goes for DIC. Don't try, if you start seeing bleeding everywhere, this is one of those I am in the trenches and the buck stops here situations that you don't want to be in. If you have that situation where blood starts oozing everywhere, pack the abdomen. Take as many swabs as you can, pack them in there, pressure wounds, close the abdomen, get the hell out and help the anesthetist. This is the second thing that scares me. I'm once again not going to spend much time here because I know Jan's talking about it again later today. Breech that's head is stuck and a massive bleeding. When you open up that tap and the water just squirts out, this is that sinking feeling. Obviously, stay calm. It's hard, it's hard, it's hard. Get as much help as you can do. I'm not going to go through postpartum hemorrhage. Just a few things on the sutures. Bleeding suture, you know, You're not going to remember this 5 years from now when it happens. So I would laminate this little picture we can easily get on the internet and put it somewhere on a wall close to the operating room. Because you're going to get, how exactly do I do that? But even if you do, and even if you didn't take my advice with the laminate, there are other ways. The whole idea is that there are many different stitches that can be used as well. It's basically pulling everything together with sutures. Remember, you can also put sutures where in the placental bed that's bleeding. Figure of 8 sutures or whatever that dissolves. These sutures have to be dissolvable as well. You have to be careful that you leave some sort of way that blood can get to the uterus. You have to leave some way for blood to run out through the vagina. Otherwise, you can end up with a ischemic uterus just a few days later. The buckley is very commonly known now. Before we had the buckley, this is a very useful tool. Each one of you should have one available. If you don't have one available, you should at least have a condom in your wallet, which works just as well. This is what we used to do. It was a condom with Foley's catheter, and you can get 500, 700 liters in there easily. So remember the condom trick. If ever you have bleeding that doesn't want to stop, get that condom, fill it up, put it in the vagina. We used to use gloves with all sorts of things in it. You will hear about internal iliac ligation. Do not do it. Sorry to say this is not for the faint of heart. There are all sorts of interesting and things that can be done if you try and get the vein. There's the ureter close by. There's a lot of big veins behind. Try and identify that while the pelvis is filling up with blood that you're trying to suck and swallow. In that panicky situation, do not try. There are better ways. Rather ligate the uterine artery right here in the corner. And remember that if you're going to ligate there are 4 blood vessels, 2 from the ovaries, 2 from the side that run in there. Once you put big figure of 8 sutures at the uterine artery at the bottom, remember to ligate immediately to the ovary, otherwise the ovaries have a chance of dying. Don't keep needle to it. The last thing, very shortly, hysterectomy. This is the final stage for all of us. If the bleeding continues. If you're doing cesarean sections in a rural setting, you must be prepared to do this. It's not as difficult as you think, except that bloody cervix, which looks very strange in pregnancy. You stay medial to the ovaries, don't go that way. You clamp, cut down the sides, and then you can leave the cervix. Your idea is only, your purpose is only to get hemostasis. So if you do a transverse incision, a transverse suture, leaving the cervix in place, because it's hard to identify and it's very hard to work with a floppy cervix. Someone like me has a little cervix like this when she's not pregnant. If she's pregnant, if you just close up, we can always go back later and get that cervix out of you. If you ding the ureter in the process, once again, don't worry about it. The urologist will worry about it later on. This we used in the army in South Africa, and I recently read SOGC journal from an article from Iran where they were looking at this for low resource settings in Africa for shock. And I thought, oh my gosh, we should get one of these. They are dirt cheap, and every single rural site should have one. Basically, you throw the patient on that, she's shocked, all your blood has been used up, there's nothing more in the lab, and you basically start with number 1, 2, 3, you put compression on it, and you do not take this off until she's in the center. Saves lives. So please look into it. We haven't got one yet, and I'm certainly going to look for one for our unit. And don't ever forget that if you're in trouble, there's no reason why you cannot pack and close, pack and close. That's the easiest way to get out of the feed. Very, very last topic. I had the occasion, once again, in my residency to have a lady, black lady, coming with no antenatal care. She was handed over to our group at 8 in the morning for poor progress. They tried to induce her through the night, could not get that cervix to budge, but the baby's heart was fine. So eventually we did a cesarean section for, failure to progress. And so we, and there was some fetal distress. So we did a laparotomy and found a live intra-abdominal pregnancy. So this is an ectopic that kept on growing. This baby did survive. There's only one trick if you run into this ever that I can tell you. This is just a picture from the internet. And that is, if you ever run into that where there's a baby in the abdomen and you see the placenta and the cord, baby's most often not alive, do not remove the placenta. Tie it off with a Vicor suture, leave it. We can always give a methotrexate or something later on to get rid of the placenta. Don't try and dislodge the placenta from a bowel or from a bladder or anything like that. Leave it alone. We can get it later. Just stop the bleeding, deliver the baby, and close the abdomen. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the audience? Yes. Thank you.
When your breaches come out of the African headed stuff, the maneuver will be started with back in. How do you get the shoulders back in?
Imagine the same thing with the head. You know, the head first. Yeah, it's impossible. Now with a head delivery, you can at least flex it and sort of slowly wiggle it in. I've never done this, and I never hope to do it. And there's no description, because it's always case reports. I can imagine that it's bloody difficult. I can give you no advice. You are going to figure it out right there and then while you have a live baby. You can imagine what the mortality and morbidity of this is going to be. This is a desperate situation. So how do you get those shoulders back with difficulty? That's it. Sorry, I can't.
My training will always do is.
Can you speak up? Speak up, sir.
I'll repeat the question.
My training will always taught to use an area shoulder.
Yeah.
Distortion, but to try and stay away from the venere in reach. And that's why my response saved the baby's life in my house on 3 occasions in Nelson. And before that, there was a group of stuff 10 years ago that also we were trained in to fight forces. And that's why I think that we should at least for GP surgeons in rural Canada have a course how to use the fiber forces, because really it helps. It's difficult and sometimes it can be really difficult. But as I said, on 3 occasions in Nelson, it's like fiber forces.
Okay, so the question here is, what about the Piper's forceps for the after-coming year? Yes, there is a place for that. I'm just telling you that forceps in unskilled hands are extremely dangerous instruments. You damage the baby, but more so you damage the mom. With forceps, you have to know what to do. With this difficult situation where you have a baby resting on your arm, and that's the whole idea, you can also have a towel around the baby to lift it up. To get in below the baby to put this Piper's forceps. The Pipers are longer than the normal forceps. And then to be able to get those blades in perfectly, it's not easy. And the problem that I have with that is that if you're not going to continue to do training and regularly practicing this, it could be a very dangerous procedure in itself. But certainly, you're not going to have Pipers, most of you, in the place. Certainly, if you're in a desperate situation, the head's like you've got nothing else to do, I would first of all consider to do some physiology. You have the option, if you don't have an operating room ready, of using whatever forceps you have, because you can do it with the Simpson forceps as well. It's just very short blades. Try to put forceps on, bring that head down. But this is really desperate situations, and you've got quite a good chance of harming mom. I would probably, before I do that, if I haven't had forceps experience, probably try it. But it's an option to keep in mind, is that forceps is an option if you feel comfortable with forceps.
All right, I think we have time for one more question.
Yes.
So because you're not talking about not fully dilated cervix, are you talking about the head getting stuck after coming through the cervix?
No, this is, remember the biggest part of the baby is the head. And so this is basically with a fully dilated cervix, even. The head is just too big. Think of this baby, if it was a cephalic presentation, would have had good progress. And you would have all the time in the world while the placenta is feeding the baby to take it out to the operating room and do your cesarean section. In this case, the cord is normally out, or is out by that time. It's been compressed by the head on the pelvic rim, and it's just too big a head. So it's with a completely open cervix, it's above the symphysis piece that this head gets stuck. It's not scary, and you guys know Morris Smelly bites. The most important thing, last tip then, of Morris Smelly bite, one hand, it's actually 2 names, but it's Morris Smelly bite. One hand, your right hand in, pulling on the baby's mouth and chin to flex the head. The second one over the shoulders. Flexion of the head is what you need. But the most important thing to remember is the third name, the third hand. You do need a nurse suprapubic to press, just suprapubic, not on the fundus, to pop the head out for a Morris Smelly bite. But a head, that sort of stuff. 3 names, 3 hands.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Pinot.
Don't forget to keep the
All righty, so our next presenters are a dual team, and they're certainly a powerful one at that. They're going to be talking about training of the rural surgery team, ESS, FBA, and of course the nurses that hold the whole team together. This is going to be a duo from Lillooet, Dr. Nancy Humber. So Nancy is a full-time GP surgeon, using the old terminology. She's in Lillooet, British Columbia. She designed and completed the third-year Enhanced Surgical Skills program at UBC in 1997. And I think the key there is she designed it. Nancy went through at a time where she decided this is what she wanted to do. She knew that this was possible. There are GP surgeons doing amazing work in rural Canada, but there was no program, and she put a program together and knocked out a lot of doors to make that happen. It was really a real leader in what was needed, and I think we owe a lot to the development of the ESS program, to Nancy's experiences. She's a community-based clinician investigator that was funded by the Vancouver Foundation and worked on research pertaining to the delivery of rural surgical services. She provides full service family practice care, emergency medicine, surgical care, maternity, acute care medicine. She's also actively involved in the community and outreach programs, family wellness clinics, and a drop-in youth clinic at the high school there. She's a preceptor in the rural surgery practice for family medicine. So in a nutshell, she really has a lot of free time on her hands. In terms of an interesting point, there's lots of interesting things about Nancy. You gotta just grab her and talk to her. She's just an amazing, amazing human being. But I learned something about her when pulling information from her. She thought of doing performance piano before deciding on a career in medicine. So at her sidekick here, the other half of the scrub team there is Maria Mashin. Maria's an RN for the past 30 years. She trained and did ICU nursing for 15 years, and then for the last 16 years has been working in the Lillooet Hospital next to Nancy. Her goal in a nutshell is to provide excellent healthcare service in the community and to maintain surgical services for rural Canada, and doing her role as a leader in Lillooet. She loves traveling, adventures, and I hope that the adventures aren't in the surgical field necessarily, nature, and she loves to learn new things, which explains the last 30 plus years in her RN training to date. So I'd like to welcome this powerful duo from a great example of how ESS works in rural Canada. I'm just going to remind all the speakers that because this is being live streamed, if you can repeat the questions that you get, then the people out there that are going to have a better chance of understanding the question and the amazing answers you give. So let's give a round of applause to our duo.
I'm always nervous when I speak. I'm so sorry. I'm glad actually to hear all those nice things, because when I hear about all those bad things that can happen, it almost gives me PTSD, and I'm afraid to go back to work. I'm Nancy Humber, and Maria and I are going to talk about the clinical coaching for excellence, a program that we've been piloting in Lillooet. There. Okay, sorry. So this is Lillooet. Lillooet is about 5,000 people. That's the Fraser River. My house is right next to the Fraser River. I've lived there for 20 years. We have 6 beds. And for a long time, it was myself, one GP anesthetist, and Maria. And we ran the program for a really long time with a casual OR nurse. Our program is a little bit bigger now, but we're always looking for recruits if anybody wants a life of adventure. And I've been there for the past 20 years. And one thing I know about small volume rural surgical programs is you really need to be adaptive and innovative and flexible. This is, I was thinking about this yesterday. This is from the side of the highway. I was there for 6 hours yesterday with my 2 6-year-old twins and my 12-year-old when they closed the highway for 6 hours. And I was thinking, let's just go sliding now. Let's get dressed, go outside, do some sliding. And I was thinking that we do that an awful lot in rural programs. We're very adaptive to the community needs. We're adaptive to the changing healthcare staff that we have, and also to the technology, changing the skill set that we offer.
My skill set that I offer now is completely different than the skill set when I first went to Lillooet. And coaching is actually really important to do that. Because sometimes healthcare in rural areas can be super lonely. When I first went to Lillooet on my own, I felt so lonely and I wondered if I had the skill set. And I used to phone the general surgeons and I used to try to build relationships. It was quite a hard slog. Not only the isolation, but the transportation, the unpredictability of it, wondering if your skills are matched for the community and what the patients actually need. And also, it takes a while to develop a highly functional team. Whether you're in the OR, in the ER, in the maternity room, you need to have a very good team. Communication needs to be excellent. You need to be able to understand the limitations and the strengths of everybody's skill set on your team. And it's not only your local team, but it's your regional team. So what's the interface between you and your regional site, your referral site? And I tried to build those relationships with things that used to exist all on its own. So itinerant surgery, going to the larger sites to do surgical procedures with some specialist surgeons, going to places to learn new procedures that your community needs. But those are all informal relationships. And what the coaching program does is try to take some of the golden experiences that used to exist and formalize it. So for 20 years, I worked super hard to develop relationships with the larger site, and then ARSEN came along. So the Rural Surgical and Obstetrical Network is really formalizing a lot of those relationships, building on key relationships between the GPs with enhanced skills, whether it's the anesthetist or whether it's a surgeon, and as well as the nurses and other members of the team, the maternity care team, and linking them with the other sites. So it takes some of the pillars of clinical coaching, which I'll talk about in more detail, operational capacity, you need to have a certain amount of volume to make it work, remote presence technology, which we've already heard, trying to mitigate some of the barriers that geography creates, quality improvement, taking small programs and nesting them in big ones, and then evaluating the whole process and the evaluation of what it's like for the providers as well as the patients. So the goals of coaching is to provide more opportunity for volume, to establish more relationships with the larger center, to actually really improve transitions of care. We can do better for our patients with better relationships between hospitals, whether it's between smaller hospitals and between a smaller and a larger hospital. And to really look at quality improvement and what that means, and not having the small sites doing a quality improvement that's not linked to anything else. There's huge value in linking small sites together for QI initiatives, as well as linking them between small and larger sites. Because volumes are really important. Volumes are important because sometimes volumes change in the smaller sites, and you can't actually tell that, oh, I haven't done a C-section for a little while. I've been off, the nurse has been off, there have been maternity cases, or I'd like to learn a new procedure. I'd like to do NovaSure ablations. We really need that in our community. It helps with some of the privileging changes. It also makes it a more sustainable model. By a whole OR team going from the smaller site to the regional site, and having the regional site come to the smaller site. And the relationships are key, but it's not the relationship between one individual and another, it's actually the relationship with the team. So it's really important for the nurses, the anesthetist, and the surgeon, as well as the maternity care providers to have relationships with the larger sites. It's important to go and do procedures shoulder to shoulder. It's important to go and do CME together. It's important to understand what it's like to work in the larger center receiving a call. It's important for the larger center to understand what it's like in the smaller center when they make the call. Also for programs like More OB, it's really hard in a small site. We're the OR team, we're actually the critical ER team, we're the core team for More OB. Just the amount of work to keep up to date is quite a lot. So linking in some of the larger programs, doing simulations at the larger site is really important. And transitions of care, I'm sure a lot of people can imagine on the left side with a grizzly bear what it's like when it doesn't work, picking up the phone and talking to somebody on the other end of the phone that actually doesn't appreciate your reality. It affects not only your relationship, but it affects patients. And the better relationships we have between the smaller and the larger sites, the more opportunities we have to improve those transitions of care. When it works well on the right, it works super well. So the larger site knows exactly what it's like at the smaller site. They know what kinds of things the team can do. Patients can be treated easier. And all of that is on the template of a coaching relationship. And CQI. So thinking about that, we're actually all in it together. So I'm not responsible for just my outcomes in my small hospital. Actually, as a region, we're responsible for all of the quality of our region, and we need to, as a region, figure out how that's going to work. So we can do local QI activities together. We can take some of the regional ones and implement them in our smaller sites. And by knowing and having a relationship, a coaching relationship with a specialist surgeon, we can use those relationships to build that. We can do case reviews, journal clubs, M&M rounds. And on one occasion, we can have the specialist come to Lillooet and actually run a simulation. Let's do a crash cesarean section under general anesthetic and actually have the gynae who's visiting for the day doing surgery actually run it and give us feedback as a team. How did we do as a team? What are the things we can do better? Picking cases on our local level to do lunches together about things that we want to learn about as a team. The important thing is to always work together. And I think I'll pass it over to Maria. And Maria's going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a nurse in a coaching relationship. So in Lillooet, what we specifically have is we have a gynecologist and we have 2 general surgeons and 1 OR nurse from our regional center, which is Kamloops. So that team comes to Lillooet. We operate together. I also go to Kamloops and I work with them and I operate them with them in Kamloops. We also have them come to our site just to do education together. And we have our nurses go to Kamloops to learn new procedures and also for education. So in that coaching model, because it's a team, we do all those other layers of what it takes to make a sustainable program. So Maria can talk a bit about that cycle. You can just start talking. What do you want me to find?
I'm going to show similar photos and I'm just going to read your story. So I'm not a good speaker as well, but I'm going to just want to share you the story from Lillooet. So my topic is it's clinical coaching for excellence in action. A nurse's perspective of our pilot project, and we are in the first year. And we want to, it's a solution to maintain professional competence for our rural surgical program for services. And I wanted to share you the story from Lillooet Hospital. This is a rural hospital in BC. And we provide a surgical program for the community for now 60 years or more. It started way back when we had only a naturopath in Lillooet in the 1950s. There was a Dr. Miyazaki, and then there came two GPs who started then the surgical services in the 1950s. And I'm not sure if it was then as difficult as now to maintain the competence and the provision of healthcare service in a rural community, but currently we experience at ease. So what is the pressure now and the obligations to be accepted as a professional healthcare provider in general and in rural in particular. On top of the basic BSN, and I'm only speaking now from nursing, we have to have ATLS, PULSE, Moral B, neonatal resuscitation, shock course, AIM course, care course, trauma core course, emergency room course, labor and delivery course, team leader course, ECG interpretation course, health surveillance, fetal health surveillance course, PAR course, MDR course, and a GI course, and so on. The list is endless. We also have to have many surgeries, so many surgeries a year, and so many numbers in each surgery, like in gynae, in hernias, or in C-sections. Also, this is overwhelming for us locally, as our surgical team consists of five staff members currently, 2 GP anesthetists, 1 GP surgeon, and 2 RNs, which is adequate for our community, but it lacks the potential to expand. Isn't it frustrating for you that living and working in rural, one has to constantly defend the way of life and work to tertiary and urban healthcare providers and systems, especially when it comes to maintaining competence or when offering to be part in the solution to healthcare issues such as surgical wait lists or to provide at-home maternity services? I assume that most people in the audience here are from a rural area and I do not have to tell you or defend myself to you why I'm living and working in a rural community. I assume you know reasons such as there is an expanded scope of practice as a GP surgeon, anesthetist, and RN. It is a place of work one can use all the acquired skills. Another reason could be that lifestyle in rural area, or maybe money, because there is incentive payments for nurses and like a student loan forgiveness per year working in a rural area, or an isolation fee. Or it is just plain interest and enthusiasm to work in a rural place. Okay, why setting the scene? Because there are drawbacks and hurdles. There are less numbers of similar cases, and there's isolation from the healthcare system. It is harder to maintain competence and confidence in the specialty one works in. We feel and experience that we have to constantly strive for approval and acknowledgement from the supporting tertiary care centers, specialists, and specialized nursing units. One RN from Revelstoke Hospital experiences that rural ORs are a dying entity, but all we want is to provide superb healthcare services to the local and outlying communities, to decrease stress and travel for patients, and to contribute to the healthcare system of the province. Now what, you might ask? We look for finding a way to address the professional isolation, maintaining professional competence, and keeping rural surgical services alive. So here comes to Ecclesias. There are ARSOM, there are RCCBC and UBC CPT with the vision and approach to use clinical coaching as a way to address key issues like competence, isolation, and maintaining surgical services. I'm sure you noticed and are aware rural surgical services seem to be in a vicious circle. If there are not enough cases, there's loss of competence, there is loss of isolation, there's loss of respect, and there's no one to ask for help, and therefore we must close the program, and there is and there are, and so on. We can see now that the coaching approach and idea will work. As quoting from the coaching handbook, the clinical coaching for excellence program is designed for rural physicians and other providers who wish to enhance their skill and build a supportive relationship, a regional team-based model of care, and able to provide high-quality rural surgical services. So now, what is happening and where are we at Lillard Hospital and the surgical team? We chose to connect with Royal Inland Hospital, our regional referral hospital. We connected with 2 general surgeons and a gynecologist. We found Roxy. She's an OR nurse who basically volunteered by asking us that she is interested to come and see our place of work, and by the way, is also the wife of one of the outreach surgeons. So we think it's 2 for 1 bingo for the nurse. There are relations, these are the relationships we try to build, and we are looking for mutual interest and curiosity in each other's work, and acknowledgement of the healthcare we all provide. We voiced our needs and within the coaching platform, which is individualized to each participating site, we are able to organize them. And as there's financial compensation for the coach and support for the coachees for travel, expense, and hotel. We have our local administration on board, and they support us nurses, and they pay our salaries for the days we are away, and the health authorities on board as well. We decided that our needs are 2 minimum days per year, each nurse, to join the OR at Royal England Hospital to be able to scrub and circulate. That's giving us exposure to many more cases in a day. We want minimal impact or stress to the staff in Royal England, and we would find days when the surgical risk is cases that we do locally, like hernia repairs, laparoscopic tubal ligation, C-section and hysteroscopy, and thermal ablation. This would address competence as we do these procedures anyway, but in smaller numbers. And the premise is that we are competent practitioners, but there's always a need to improve and to update knowledge and gaps. We also want the coach to come at least once a year to get to know our hospital, our work, and our community. This is financially covered by the coaching program. We think and hope this provides a basis of mutual understanding, discussion of issues, and building supportive relationships. As this is a pilot project and being offered by UBC CPT and for CME for doctors, that's the plan, province-wide. We agreed to be part in the pilot in the research component, and our first year of starting the coaching relationship is finishing in April this year. So where are we now? This is an organic process and it grows over time. Due to its formalized method and financial compensation, it provides commitment and obligation which would disappear in the course of work and life. It is up, it has its up and down, and we have to learn what it means to be a coach and to be a coachee. Basically, it is not a mentorship, which is, I find a person which I would like to emulate and in her professional role and ask for advice and experience, and it is not a preceptorship. I'm a learner and need to consolidate knowledge and gain experience. Coaching assumes that everyone knows the answer and has the skills, but need questioning, listening, feedback, encouragement, support, and to quote from Coaching Outside the Box, maximize their personal and professional potential. It really is an answer to a need, without diminishing or depreciating professionals in their respective role. Is it rural or urban? In supporting provision of excellent healthcare to communities and the public. Thank you for listening.
I think we have time for a couple questions for the dynamic from the West. Dr. Humber, hold on a second. Dr. Humber, what other sites are there in BC that are doing the coaching pilot?
There's another pilot site, and then because the funding for the neurosurgical and technical network has coaching embedded in it, there'll be up to 8 more cases that would be part of the program. So that's it's a joint initiative that's funded from the Doctors of BC and from the Ministry of Health for a 5-year funding for creation of a surgical obstetrical network in the province of BC.
Are there any examples of this elsewhere in Canada where there's a formalized coaching or mentorship network to help build the big R word, the relationships between specialists and ESS?
I'll comment with that. The anesthesia, this is a big push, as you might see with coaching as well, in the world of GP anesthesia. And across the province, we have several other sites. We have a total of 10 sites now that have taken interest in developing these coaching relationships with specialist anesthesiologists and medical centers. And the specialists at NCDL are going out to rural sites. And we're going back to the tertiary centers to work with those specialists. So we've had great reviews from the GPAs with this program, and it's really taken off. I think it's a great way to provide education in our setting anyway with anesthesia. So hopefully with the surgical community will work as well as with anesthesia.
Is there you've worked at a coaching, teaching people how to coach and do coach, is that something that's part of that too? Yeah, so I'm just the person using the program. It's quite a in-depth program where there's education for the coachees and the coaches, and it's a formalized evaluation done through UBC CPP, through people who are experts in the field. But I'll give you an example. Like, I think it's not only good for learning a new skill, it's actually better for patient care. So I'm just thinking, I phone the surgeon and say, I have this lady, she's got bilateral breast lumps, I did a core biopsy, this is what it shows. She's 90, she doesn't want to travel. He says, I don't need to see her. Do this, start out with tamoxifen, I'm good. Everything you did is right. And the patient never traveled. And boy, she was really happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that concludes our first session of the morning. We're going to take a half-hour break. This is a larger break than some of the conferences we go to, but it's because this is where I think a lot of the learning and the networking and the ideas start to mill about as we discuss the morning talks, and we look forward to the next sessions. I'm going to ask for the speakers between now and noon, if you can find me during the break and get me your bios, that would be great. And I'll look forward to grabbing those. But otherwise, we'll head out and enjoy your break. We'll see you back here at 10:30.